Hello YouTubers and fellow hams. Well, working away on the case for the transmitter. Now that I have a working power amplifier, this is the new case I'm going to be putting it in. It's an old TV distribution amplifier from Radio Shack, which is big enough that I can put the case in here, or I can put the PA in here. I've got a piece of PC board material here as a divider, with a couple of RCA pass-throughs to feed RF from the PA down to, this is going to be the relay board down here. I'm going to remove the relay from the VFO and take the old relay for the PA, and the transmit receive switching will be here. The relay for grounding the receive antenna will be here. Antenna out, receiver, or antenna connector, receiver out there, power in. So yeah, I've been test fitting everything in the case. It looks like it's all going to fit just great. I've 3D printed some standoffs to mount the boards. So I'm pretty much ready to do the final bit of work on finishing up the electronics with the transmit receive board, relay board, a few changes on the VFO, hooking everything up. I've test fit all of the connectors and switches and such, and everything is the way I want it now. So I'm going to do labels next for the case and get it all labeled and get the controls mounted, and then I'll start wiring everything else up. And as I promised, I'm going to do a video here on how I do the labels. There was comments and questions on that from other people and local hams. They really liked these labels that I did on the other case. And I've done this, done labels this way in the past to replace labels on radios I restored and such, and so I thought I would walk you through my process for doing labels. So let's get everything out of here, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so this is going to be the front of the case. I've got my controls mounted: tuning control, key input, power switch, spot switch. And this will be a blank area. I'll just put text over here, you know, what it is and all that. In the back, we've got antenna, receiver out, power in. Now, this case had a lot of extra holes in it. You can see these blue plugs I 3D printed and glued in there. And that's so that you won't accidentally punch through the label in one of those holes, you know. So I've plugged those with custom printed 3D printed plugs. The first thing I have to do is measure stuff, right? Well, I need to take all these controls and things out because I'll need to be measuring to the holes. So let me do that, and then I'll start the camera back up and I'll show you what we're doing. Okay, I've got everything out of the case, and to make these labels I got to measure everything. Now, I'm going to be using a program called Inkscape, which is an open-sourced free illustration program very similar to Adobe Illustrator. You could use Adobe Illustrator if you have it. Inkscape is a free download. It's a great little program if you want to do drawings and illustrations. I'd recommend checking it out. But that's what I'm going to be using. Now, to measure stuff, some things are pretty straightforward, like measuring the actual size of the case. And I just figure where my label is going to start and stop, and I measure it. And it's 172 millimeters wide. And my label is going to go from right before the bevel, so that's 50 millimeters tall. I'm working in millimeters. You can measure in whatever measuring system you like. Since I've started using metric, I've gotten used to it and I really like it, so that's what I use. You can measure in inches, you can measure in cubits, you know, whatever works for you. That doesn't matter, but I'll be working in millimeters. One important thing, okay, your illustration program is going to have on-screen rulers, right? It's going to provide for measurements of high accuracy, but you need to know the origin point. And what I mean by that, grab a regular old sheet of paper. Okay, So you're in your illustration program, and your illustration program is going to basically give you a sheet of paper, right, that you're working on, probably in that orientation. I'll be rotating it to landscape. But what you need to know is you need to know the origin point. So your illustration program has rulers on screen, right? Well, where is 0? Is 0 at the top? Is 0 at the bottom? In this direction, the X direction, is 0 on the left? Is 0 on the right? You need to know that. And in Inkscape, the origin is on the left and the bottom. So this lower corner is 0. Knowing that, I know where to measure from. So let's bring the case back in here. And a sheet of paper that I can do my illustration on. Yeah, I know, that's ugly, but okay, it doesn't matter. So we know that this distance here is 172, and that this distance here is 50. Now we got to measure where the holes are. Alright? Now remember, the origin is on the left and the bottom, so I want to measure from the left and from the bottom. Normally in drafting, you would measure to the center of the hole. But in the illustration program, objects like circles and squares are going to be referenced from the left edge and the bottom edge, the same as the paper. So I'm going to measure to the edge of the hole, right? So for example, the tuning control here, I'm going to take my ruler, line it up with the left edge, and at the hole I'm at 150, no, 105, 6, 107. Okay, so my tuning hole at this point right there is 107. And from the bottom of the label it will be 10, 11, 12. 12. And I'll do that for each of the holes. I'll measure to the left edge of the hole and to the bottom edge of the hole. And then we'll have our measurements for the front label. The other thing I need to do is measure the diameter of the hole. And the reason that I need to be accurate with that, I'm going to use calipers for that. Okay, that's 9 millimeters. Let me grab a pen so I can write smaller. 9. Which I know this one is also 9. The reason I'm doing that is on the label I'm going to put holes as references because I need to put text on there. Here's a mock-up I did earlier of the label before I started drilling holes. And that's about where the text is going to be on the label. Spot, power, tune, key. But I want to make sure that the text is going to fit and not conflict with the controls themselves or the knobs or whatever. And in fact, speaking of that, that's the knob I'm going to use for tuning. So I need to measure its diameter. Again, so I can make sure that it doesn't cover up the text. So that's 10, 15, 16, 17, that's 18 millimeters. So my knob is 18. Alright. Okay, so I'm going to make the rest of these measurements and then we'll do the back panel. Now for the back panel I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I already know that this is the same dimension, 172 by 50, since the case is symmetrical, so I just need to measure to the holes and their diameters. Alright, I've made all my measurements, I have enough information. Now it's time to go up to the computer, load up Inkscape, and create the labels. Alright, we're up here at the computer, and I have Inkscape loaded. This is Inkscape. As I said, fairly similar to Adobe Illustrator. By default, when you start it up, you end up with a page in portrait mode. We're going to change that to landscape, so I'll go up here to File, Document Properties, and in the Properties window right here, Landscape. And US letter size is what I'm working with. Okay, that should be good. There we go. And we'll zoom in on our page here a little bit. All right, so first thing we need to do is we need to draw the outline of our label, which is a rectangle, right? So I'm going to come up here on the left, we've got our tools, and this is a rectangle tool. So I'll select that, and I'll draw a rectangle. And now we have our rectangle. All right. The default, I think, on Inkscape, I've changed my defaults, but the default is going to be, it's going to be a blue rectangle. It's going to be filled with blue. And you'll want to change that to be clear or empty, and you'll want an outline that's black and easy to see. So with the object selected here, if I right click on it, in the menu that pops up, Fill and Stroke is the fill pattern for the object, and the stroke is the line type. So I'll select that, and off to the right here our tools appear. Okay, fill, I've selected no paint. I think the default is like that, where it fills it in. So I've selected the X or nothing. And stroke style is the thickness of the line, about 0.5 millimeter, gives us a nice clean outline. So I'll set that. And stroke paint sets the color, and it gives you a color selector here. So I've drug our red, green, and blue all the way down, and transparency all the way up, so our color is black. So that should be the color of our outline. And if I click out here away from the rectangle, you can see, oh, we've got a dotted line for the outline. We don't want that. So let's select our object, stroke style, dashes, no. I want a solid line. There we go. There, nice outline. All right, now, remember I was talking about the origin point and measurements and all that? On the side of the screen here are the rulers, and 0 is on the left edge and 0 is in the bottom corner. Since I'm going to be putting holes in here to represent where my holes are so I can line my text up, and I want to measure those precisely, I need to move the rectangle so that it's at the origin at 0 and 0. Now when it's selected, up here at the top of the screen there are 4 boxes: X, Y, width, and height. Those are the dimension. The location is X and Y. That's where the lower left corner of our object is. And width and height are the dimensions of the object. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set X to 0 and Y to 0, and you can see that moved our rectangle to the lower corner of the page. And then width, I know that it's 172, and height is 50. And so now our rectangle is exactly the size that we need for our label. To work on it, I'm going to zoom in on it. You can just fit it in the screen there. I'll pull it up here where you can see it better. All right, so that's the outline of our label. We're ready to start making holes. This here is a circle tool, and you can see the program gives you nice hints when you mouse over things. So I'm going to select the circle tool, and I'm going to make a circle for my first hole. Again, I've set my defaults already to just be an outline and no fill. You might have to change that on yours. It might come up filled, but we already talked about doing that. I'll select the pointer up here in the upper left, the selection tool, so I can work with the object. Now, this is going to be my spot hole, and I know that's 7 millimeters. So I'll come up here to width and height, and I'll set that to 7 and 7. Now the hole's the right side. And my dimensions from the left edge of the screen, or from the left edge of the label. And let's see, X is 111 and Y is 36. 111, and 36. There. So now I have set that hole so its left edge is 111 from the left edge of the label and 36 from the bottom, which is what I measured. So that's what we're going to do for each of our holes. Oh, and I've set the dimension of it to match, which is 7 millimeters. Now, a shortcut. You could come over here and create another hole and go through all that. I've already got it close. I know that the diameter is the same for my power button hole, so I'm going to select it and do a Control-C to copy it and a Control-V to paste another copy of it. Now I've got a second hole, and all I need to do is enter the position, the X and Y position. So that's 153 and 37. So I'll come up here to X, 153.0 and 37.0. Boom! Just like that, my second hole is placed on the label. Okay, now let's do the hole for the tuning control. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy the existing hole. Control-C, Control-V. I'll set my X position where I measured it, which is 107. And Y is 12. And its dimension is, it's an 9 millimeter hole. So 9, 9. And there we go. There's my hole for the tuning control. And again, I'll do a Control-C, Control-V. And this hole is the same diameter, 9 millimeters, so I don't have to change that. All I have to do is put in my measurements, which were, can't read my own writing here, 151.5 and 11. 151.5 and 11. There. And just like that, my holes are in place. Now I can put in my text for the label. All right, so we'll come down here. This is the text tool. I'll select that. I'll come up here and I'll click, so I'm ready to type. And we'll put in the first text, which is tune. All right, we need to make some changes to the font. It's all just a taste. If I come up here and select this T in the upper part of the screen, that brings up our text tool over here, where I can select my font and style and everything. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it as this sans serif font. I like that font. I'm going to set it to bold, and I'm going to hit, oh, point size. How big do I want it to be? And I think 22 is fine. Let's apply, and then I can come over here with my selection tool and I can drag it down where I want it, which is right there at the bottom of the label underneath the tune control. Now remember that I measured my knob, right? So I'd know how big the knob is. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make another circle, and I'm just going to set it to be the diameter of the knob, which was 18 millimeters, so 18 and 18. And we'll drag it over and we'll see, with that centered on that hole, it looks like it's going to be fine. It's not going to cover up the text. So that's what I wanted to see. That's good. I'll go ahead and just hit the delete key to delete that outline, because I know that it's fine. All right, so here's my text for tune. Looks like it's not quite centered. We'll center that right there. Take it right down to the edge of the label. Good. All right, the next one is the key. And I'm going to do the same trick. Instead of going through and entering all that data again, I'm just going to do a Control-C and a Control-V and take my copy over here and center it. And then I'm just going to change the text over here. So I come up here to the text tool, hit text, change that to key, apply, and there we go. Now I can move it and properly center it under the key input. Boom. And then we'll do the same thing for the the spot in the power switch. So Control C, Control V, drag my copy up here, change the text, spot, hit apply, and center it under the spot switch. Control V, move that over here, change the text, power, apply, and that's just gonna fit, isn't it? I wonder if I should use lowercase on these. What do you think? Would it look better if I used lowercase? Let's try that. It might make it fit better. Power. Yeah, it'll fit better. I think that looks fine. Let's just do that. We'll just change all these to lowercase, to well, capitalized first letter with lowercase for the rest. There. Spot, we'll change that. Recenter it. So you can play around with this here and you can make it look exactly like you want. It's your project, it's your front panel. You know, you can be as fancy or simple as you want to be. I'm going to go ahead and do this on all these. I like that. I got to move that up a little bit so the tail of the Y shows up. All right, so there's the basics of our label. I'm going to put some text over here on this big blank area. So I'll come up here and I'll select the text tool and I'll click up here. There. All right, so that's basically my front panel label. I'm going to dress it up a little bit. Just a plain white is kind of boring to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the box, just the outer box, and I'm going to go to Fill and Stroke, Fill, and we have patterns here. So linear gradient. There. I like that. What do you think? I think that looks good. So that is going to be my front panel label. Now I've got to do the back panel. So I'll do that next, and then we'll, well, let's print this one out. Let's just go ahead and apply this front panel, and then the back panel is basically the same process. So before I can print this out, most printers, inkjet, laser printers and all that, will not be able to print right to the edge of the paper. So I need to move this label up into the center of the paper. So I'm going to select, by drawing a box around the whole thing, I'm going to select everything that's there. All the holes, the text, the box, the whole bit. Now I can move the whole thing, and I'll just move it up to the paper like that. So I've got plenty of space around it so the printer can print the whole thing. And we'll just print it. Spit it out on my, I got a color laser printer, we'll use that. You could use an inkjet printer, doesn't matter. But we'll print this out to the paper and then we'll laminate it and glue it on the front of the case. All right, here is our printed out label. Looks pretty good to me. Now I'm going to laminate it. But I don't have a laminating machine. Do you? Of course not. Probably not. Unless you work at a school, you probably don't have access to one either. Well, here's a little trick. Clear packing tape. That's right. Clear packing tape actually does a really good job. Boy, I'm going to have to edit that. Of doing lamination. So I'll cut it out. I'll take the tape and I'll just carefully stretch that over the label. And then we'll have to take like a pencil and roll the air bubbles out. I was hoping this tape would be wide enough to get the whole thing in one go, but I'm gonna have to put a second layer on. It's not quite wide enough. We work all those air bubbles out of there. And faking lamination. It'll be quite permanent. It'll repel water. And this is the tricky part when you have to add a second piece there. Looks like I have just a little bit of a seam there, but you can work that out with a pencil or a roller or something. And yeah, I didn't quite get it lined up perfect. It's gonna be fine. You could, depending upon your level of OCD, you can really get this looking good, but as you can see, it's gonna have a nice glossy surface to it. And yeah, I think it's gonna work. Alright, I'm gonna get my scissors and I'm gonna cut this out, and then we'll go and we'll put it on the front of the transmitter and we'll see how it looks. Alright, here's our case, here's our label. We'll set that over the top, line it all up. Looks good. Now, how are those holes lined up? Well, I got a flashlight here. Close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades. I think that'll work just fine. Alright, so we just need to affix it to the front of the case. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, I like to use 3M photo mount adhesive. Alright, I bought this can at Hobby Lobby years ago, and I've been using this stuff, the same can, forever. It's a spray-on glue. It works great. It'll hold a label on a piece of equipment forever. In fact, I even use this to hold the little plugs in the case. Right. So I need to spray the back of my label with a little bit of adhesive. It doesn't take much. I'm going to get it all over my hand doing this for the camera. Make sure I'm in camera view here. Hold on. Alright. Well, don't want to get overspray on everything. So we'll just hit the label with a few squirts of adhesive. Bring the case in, and very, very carefully, this is always the tricky part, very, very carefully line it up on there. Smooth that down, and I'll take something like a barrel shape, like a marker, and I'll just sort of roll over that to make sure I don't have any air bubbles in it. Make sure it's well on the front of the case. Let's see if we lined it up right. Yep, all our holes are lined up. And that's pretty much it. We now have our front label on. Look at that. I'm going to let the glue dry, and then once the glue is dry, I'm going to take a razor knife like this, and I'm going to, well, I could probably do one of them right now. You sort of punch through where the hole is, find the edge, and you just kind of saw downward along the edge of the hole to cut out your hole through the label, just like that. See? Ta-da! So I'll do that with each of the holes. I'm going to wait for the glue to dry to do the rest of them, because you don't want to move anything. You don't want the label to move until it's totally dry. It takes about 10-15 minutes for it to set up really well. But that's pretty much it. That's how I do my labels. And as you can see, it's nice and glossy. It looks good. You can be as artistic as you want with the fill pattern on the box. put graphics in there, put pictures in there. You could put a butterfly in the background really faint, or whatever you want to do. You could make anything you want for your label, and you're going to have a nice, somewhat professional looking label on your project. So that's what I do. That's how I make them, and that's what makes a difference on how nice a project turns out. So hope you found that helpful. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you're not already a subscriber, click to subscribe. Join us on the Facebook channel for discussion about the videos. And if you'd like to help support this channel, please click to support me on my Patreon page.